I don't know if you're aware of this, but Jeff Bezos is one of the richest guys on earth. He's the head of Amazon, and his wife and him just recently split up. So she got some humongous payout. I think it was $60 billion. That's not a bad divorce settlement, is it? Anybody's worth. But that's not what I'm worried about. And I'm not a big fan of Bezos compared to Musk. I much prefer Elon Musk because I think Bezos is just a bit of a corporate hack. He censors books. He takes books off Amazon and won't let you read them. I don't like censorship. I'm a libertarian, and I just think he's a bit of a jerk, to be honest. But his wife, she's got all this loot, 60 billion. Now she's decided to actually distribute it. She's going to give away half her wealth. Apparently, this is sort of a very trendy thing to do amongst the high-tech elites. So she's actually given away $1.7 billion, and mainly to left-wing woke type organisations. I'm not saying all the money is going to the wrong place, but most of it is sort of, the usual woke stuff, which I don't like. I want mainstream people to get money. I think there's a lot of battling families. I bet you none of those are going to get a cent from her. It's all about the virtue signalling amongst the elite of America, the wealthy elite, and she's just going to basically keep bolstering these organisations, some of which are, in my opinion, overtly racist. She's also supporting LGBT stuff. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth. There's money could be much better spent elsewhere. For instance, she could actually have forked out some money to pay for the bloody the Amazon workers, should have given them a bonus. That would have been an idea, seeing they actually helped create her wealth. But no word of that. Of course, that's way too practical and boring. It has to be something that's seen by the glitterati, the West Coast elites in America, that basically is something to talk about at cocktail parties and say, well, aren't I a virtuous person? I mean, it's nothing to her. She's 60 billion. I mean, who could spend that? So 1.7, it's a lot of money, but to her it's not. And I find it very depressing that people with that much wealth are now channeling it in those directions, probably to some organisations that are pretty shonky, in my opinion. I haven't got all the details. I mean, apparently she's doling out some money to some disadvantaged black schools, urban schools. That's fine, but I suspect that they're probably also they probably preach a bit of politics as well, and that's something I don't like. But Tim Poole wasn't happy about it either, and I tend to agree with Tim that when these people have so much money, they also have a lot of political power. She could also, put it into the Biden campaign. She hasn't, thank God, so that would have been worse. But these other organisations do work in a political fashion, and they help sway public opinion. And I think there's just way too much of this woke crap happening in our society. But anyway, that's the way it is. So look, we've had some good news this week. We've had some bad news. I feel really sorry for people in Victoria. I spoke to a mate who's actually who's living in a nice part of town, but he's still a prisoner. He can go out and exercise once for 1 hour a day, I think. I was very happy to hear from him, though, because I thought there was a picture of a guy who looked very similar to him who was actually a victim of coronavirus, and that freaked me out. So I sent him an email, didn't get a response to that. Then I texted him, and he replied to the text, so I knew he was fine. So he's in his 70s, early 70s, so he's getting on a bit, but he's reasonably in good shape for a guy who actually likes to drink even more than me. So he has reformed, mind you, so that's good. But he actually does have a fairly healthy lifestyle. He's not vegan, but he's pretty close to it. So he's got and he does a bit of exercise, and he does volunteer work, which obviously is good for the soul and his overall health, I think. So and he's reasonably gregarious. So that was good news to hear from him, because I had another friend that I knew back in Melbourne who actually died, and his brother rang up out of the blue and that was, whoa, that was really surprising. He was carrying a bit of weight and he died of a heart attack. And yeah, it really hits home when you know someone that. I worked on a few writing projects with him, and so I knew him pretty well. So that was a bit of a blow. So fingers crossed, not too many people are going to go that way in Victoria. And so far, not many have. Not many people have died, but the economic consequences of what's going on there are much dire, in my opinion, than what the medical consequences are. So, Daniel Andrews, I hope you do resign. I hope you show some level of honour and fall on your sword, because you really are way past your use-by date, in my opinion. But anybody out there heard of this guy? Anders Tegnell. He's the head epidemiologist. I think that's the right term. Epidemiologist? Yep. He's the head epidemiologist in Sweden, and he's regarded by many as a hero. The reason is he's stuck to his guns. He's basically instituted a no lockdown, no mask, school open type regime. And finally, after there's been quite a few deaths in Sweden, but finally they're on the right side of the ledger, and the death rate is dropping substantially. It's a sustained drop in deaths, and it looks as though they're over the worst of it. And in Stockholm in particular, it appears they've achieved herd immunity. So that's a big deal, and the locals are very, very happy about it, because they know how bad things are elsewhere in Europe. So especially places like Spain, which has been through total hell, and I don't think Britain's doing that brilliantly either. Their actual death rate is slightly lower than Britain, and but they've taken the tough medicine. They've basically gone the laissez-faire route, and nature, as it is, has come back to give them that herd immunity. I mean, it could go pear-shaped with another wave, but at the moment it's looking good, and the people there are very grateful. So I thought it was just good to mention this, because it does give you some hope, and it makes you realise that what is happening in Victoria could be totally pointless. I mean, if you just open up the economy, let people do what they're doing, protect the vulnerable, and we should be okay. We just let it run its course. But we're so risk averse in Australia. It's a bit sad as a commentary on this country. I think we've become very soft. We've had an incredible increase in living standards, and I'm a very independent person, so I don't have a great deal of sympathy for this cotton wooling of kids. I was never cotton wooled as a child. My mother actually was more laissez-faire with me than my father, which is a bit of a swap in a normal circumstance. But I just think that we're going to cause so much more pain long term by taking the road we're taking, compared to, say, Sweden, which appears to have done the right thing. It's taken a while before this has become apparent, but sometimes you need to take a bit of stiff medicine, and there's a number of deaths there. They've had, particularly in the migrant areas, they've had a high death rate, but now things are definitely on the improve. And as I say, the Swedes are very happy with the situation. So, it's a big world here. We've got a number of different case studies to look at, and I think Sweden is one of those ones that we can look at with some optimism. And maybe it will have an effect upon the policymakers in this country, because, actually, look, Queensland didn't even have hasn't had an extra corona case in the last 24 hours. So, I mean, we're doing extremely well. I know New South's having a bit of pain. And I was talking to a friend about it last night on the phone, and I said, well, I told him I was very pissed off with the fact that the Black Lives Matter marches were allowed to take place. He was quite supportive of it, so he's much more further left than I am. And he pointed out to me that we didn't have a spike in any cases in Brisbane after having the Black Lives Matter protests, but I made a connection with the ones down in Melbourne. Now, I may be wrong there, but I think the difference between Melbourne and Brisbane is one obvious difference. We really don't have much of a winter in Queensland.
and they certainly have a real winter in Melbourne. But again, having said that, if that was the case, you think Tasmania would be an absolute basket case, but from what I can gather, it isn't. So it's complex. It's a very complex situation, and I'm still very down on Andrews. I've never liked him anyway, to be honest. So, you know, it's not like this is a new thing with me. But one thing I do think is really reprehensible is the way the media has used this to their advantage by continually quoting infection figures as opposed to deaths, and they make that their big headline figure because it's more dramatic, and they're just basically in the business of scaring people. They don't seem to really care about what's the common good for people. I have very little regard for the media. I think they're a very negative influence on our lives these days, and they need a basic clean-up. But you know, that's as you know, I always I'm a promoter of alternate media, and specifically the YouTubes or Bitchutes. That's where I get my information, and I don't just go one source. And but I do have the luxury of time, as I've mentioned before as well. So, but look, the Swedish thing, it could be the answer, and if it is, then they are totally stuffing it in Victoria at the moment. Because I've got a graph here showing the correlation between unemployment and death rates, and the mortality rate definitely spikes in unison with an increase in unemployment. So you don't just look at the virus deaths, you've got to look at the big picture, and you've also got to look at things about such as elective surgery being cut down or cut out totally. And also things like oncology facilities being suspended because you can't have people leaving their homes. And that also means diagnostic doesn't happen. There's a lot of implications to shutting down an economy. We're a very complex economy these days, and the ramifications of doing this are wide-reaching. So we've got to keep all that in perspective, and to get an overall figure of what the damage of a virus is, it's the actual figure on the virus is only one aspect of this, and we need the total picture to get a really genuine idea of what damage is being done. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you think there's anything there of use to you or entertainment or whatever, and either do that or give me a thumbs up, or if you're feeling really energetic, do both. That'd be great. But please don't ignore me. That's the worst thing you can do on YouTube, is be ignored.